Test, test. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we
Yep.
can.
Thank you. Yep. Sounds good.
Okay, we will call the Wednesday, July 7th meeting of the Ramsey-Washington Metro Watershed District Board to order at 6:30. The first order of business is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Seconded.
Roll call.
Okay. Cliff,
Aye.
Diane,
Aye.
Pam,
Aye.
Val,
Aye.
and Larry.
Moving, the agenda was on page 3. And to help people follow along with the agenda and where we are, as we move from section to section or project to project, we will try to call out the page on the board packet that we're on so that you can follow along a little bit better. If somebody wants to see a visual that's attached to a particular item, bring that up and we'll see if Tina can find that and put it on the screen briefly at least. I also don't see that we have any visitors, so we don't have to have any, we pretty much know everybody that's here at this point. So we'll proceed with item number 2, which is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion of the consent agenda? I just had one comment on the consent agenda. It won't affect the vote on it, but the KMSP Tower project we're approving at this point, I think it's very good that it's indicated in there that they intend to follow up with us to further improve that area once they get done with it. That's a nice thing to see. And I'm sure that came from staff working from them. So thank you for doing that. Anybody else have any comments? Tina?
Yeah, I have a comment. Just one, I really want to compliment the district. I think it's for example, the project of collaborating with the city of St. Paul to pull out the Eurasian milfoil. I just think that's a good example of how we're collaborating with other entities to achieve the mission of the watershed district. And it's, I mean, possibly one that's worth promoting.
Right, thank you. That's a good comment too. And I agree with that. Thank you to the staff for doing that. I think we're accomplishing a lot here. So any other comments? Roll call?
Okay. Cliff,
Aye.
Diane,
Aye.
Pam,
Aye.
Val. Oh, Val.
Aye. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. And then Larry.
Aye. And now we move to item number 4, which is visitor comments. There aren't any visitors, so we don't have any visitor comments.
No.
To item number 5. You know what page we're on, Tina, by any chance?
Yep. Yeah. So, and I apologize. It looks like my page numbering is off by 1. So we're on page 62, which is the enforcement action report for the permit.
Okay, 62. Thank you. We'll get this all, there we go. Any comments or discussion on the enforcement action report?
I just thought it was kind of interesting if you look at the residential permits issued and also closed, that because of this pilot that we're doing with the staff approval of single lot residential, between board meetings, there was a permit issuance, project completion, and permit closure, all in between the last time we met. So I think it's providing a good service to residents that we're able to enable them to get their projects done quicker when a lot of them are such short projects. So,
Right.
but yeah, I'll be coming back to you guys next month with some more metrics on the program, because that'll be the 1 year completion of the pilot. And then to discuss, what we should do moving forward. So more info to come next month.
Good. That's been a good program, but we have committed to reviewing it and deciding how we want to, whether we want to make it permanent moving forward or not. So we will do that next month. Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate that. Any other comments? From then we move to the stewardship program. Budget is the main thing on that. Any comments on that program? That's item number 7.
Yep, on page 65.
Thank you. Nothing? We're easy tonight. Okay, that moves us to item number 7, I guess, which is the 2022 budget planning memo in discussion.
Yeah, so that starts on page PDF. This is a typical formatted memo for our July meeting that outlines, really looks at the larger categories for our budget and what might make up the dollar amount that we'll be proposing next month in the August meeting. So this is really just a general discussion. A lot of work happens between June and August as we're working with landowners on projects. We're kind of finalizing some details on what we're going to be pursuing and for 2022 or would like to be pursuing. So I've really outlined those things for you. I'm happy to walk through it or answer questions, whatever way you'd like to do that.
Okay, any comments on the budget thing?
Tina, can you?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Well,
Oh, still no, can't hear me. Okay,
Yeah, we can hear
sorry.
you. Yeah, it's
On
a
the
little
targeted, it's a little light. Okay,
late.
it might be coming through my computer, and that's my mistake. Are you gonna walk us through the process in prioritizing like the retrofit project or any of the projects targeted in August as well? Is that going to be part of the review?
Yeah, I mean, we can have Aaron and Paige talk about that process. They started that process this month and talk about how they get to that. But yes, they're still inputting projects into that prioritization tool and kind of formalizing what we would call our highest priority water quality projects. But Aaron and Paige, do you want to talk about that a little bit and how we're using that tool?
Paige, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
Yeah, I can start. So we have a big list, Val, a big list of projects that we can do. So this prioritization tool helps us just kind of organize what we're doing. We've started, I think in the packet this month talks about looking at some equity sites kind of in our equity area of St. Paul. So we did that and now we need to put those into the prioritization tool, but then using that to input some other projects that BAR has looked at as far as different feasibility studies and seeing where those come out and grabbing or going after kind of the, I don't want to say, I mean, some of the low hanging fruits, but like the ones that are going to be the easiest to work with landowners, figuring out if there's some city owned or county owned sites that we can work with. And then also, that kind of rates higher on the priority too. So just narrowing that list down, we have a good list at this point. So I think we'll have enough to go from. I don't know if there's more, Aaron.
I guess I was just going to add, we did, I don't know when this was now, several months ago or last year, and it's all a big blur, but we did create a prioritization tool to look at that long list of projects and help us figure out across a number of different metrics, including cost effectiveness and some of the other things that Paige mentioned in terms of willing land ownership, pounds of phosphorus reduced or number of structures most protected, or all sorts of different metrics. And it can rank them from 1 to however many. I don't know how many we're up to. And then as we learn of new project opportunities through sub-watershed feasibility studies or through things we learn through our partnerships, we put those in the tool and reshuffle the deck to see how things come out. So for this exercise, for trying to figure out from BAR's standpoint, which projects we thought could move forward, we looked at, I think, like the top 15 or 16 projects and figured out, okay, some of these are stewardship grant program potentials, some of these are flood risk reduction projects, some of these are water quality projects. And so that fed into the memo that you see, at least the engineering parts of the memo that you saw for budgeting. So that we did that prioritization tool before you came on board. And so that's something that we could get more information on.
If there's a write-up for it, I don't need to see every I and T. I just want to understand the process a bit better. I'd love to read that. That'd be great.
Sure. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll definitely get you that. And I think Erin mentioned it. So kind of the way the process starts is we take a sub-watershed and we do an analysis of that sub-watershed and look for potential for projects to be done in that area. And then those project potentials get put into that tool. And then we also, at the same time, Paige and BAR staff are pursuing, discussions, relationships with various landowners. And as those kind of materialize, that information gets put into the spreadsheet, and then these projects kind of start rising to the top for what we look to pursue for the following year. Diane has her hand up.
Yeah, we saw the first draft of the tool and gave feedback, but I don't think we've seen it since. So if you're using it, could you send it around to everybody?
Sure, absolutely.
Yep, we'll do that.
Yeah, and I'd like to ask too, if you're using these as we go through this process, I'd like to see the information in the tool. So, and maybe have a discussion. You were kind of having that discussion without being specific. If there are key issues in there that are questionable or have to do with the ranking, I think that would be good for the board to see too.
Sure. Yeah, is that something you'd like to see in the next month's board packet, like a description of those? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, I think
absolutely.
As we're proposing, and just as a reminder too, so, we have that targeted retrofit fund, and we have like the flood risk reduction fund. Those are pots of money that are not designated for a particular project, right? So even we'll tell you what we think we might do in 2022 with those funds and what we might need to complete those projects. But as the year goes on, sometimes those priorities change, or those opportunities change, and then we bring them to you at a later time for discussion on doing that. But I think we can definitely show you, how those projects fall in that tool and why they're being pursued.
Yeah, and I agree. We've been through that discussion before, and I understand that. I think that's great. It would just help understand it as we are going through the process and we're approving these things and understanding where the money is going, to get a little more background on it and some trade-offs that you have. And you're right, we established, okay, here's how much we're going to spend on targeted retrofit. We think these are where we're going to go, but they're not going to, but this is what we're committed to spending, and that's it. Okay.
Yeah, but we do like to have a good idea of what those funds are, where we're directing at, because this is when we really need to start that process anyway, working with landowners to, complete projects for the following year. So.
Okay, good. Do we have a goal for a reserve that we have?
So the way the reserve policy is written is that we want to have at least 50% of our general fund in reserves. And at this point, we have about 100% of our general fund budget in reserve. and we have for many years now had enough to cover that full general fund. And I think it'll be close to that again. So it depends on what percentage of our budget we end up spending in 2021, typically around 75% or 70%, somewhere in there. So those reserve funds could go towards the levy as well, and do plan for that.
And that was kind of my point, is we have to be cognizant again of the levy and, our duty to tax-paying citizens. So, okay, good. Thank you.
And Pam has her hand up.
Yeah, so I agree with Larry in that it's nice every year when we're presented with what the levy is and how it changes and, what it was in previous years. And I find that very helpful as well. I just want to request that, I have for years been saying I'd like us to take a little more consideration of groundwater, since that is our mandate as well. And as we're considering the budget, maybe considering a small amount of time and effort, and maybe the education section for starting to think about and build a website and information and links to information on groundwater. And I think we had discussed in the past, like we have it on the agenda today to talk about PFAS and whatnot, just some information and links about that, I think would be helpful. I mean, that'd be a start. But anyways, this is a budget discussion, so I'm just hopeful we could budget a little bit for that.
Sure. Yep. And we can highlight too some places where it might not be obvious that it's groundwater related. There might be a few places where we can point that out too, so you're aware that there is money going towards that. But I like what you're saying about the education component as well. So we'll take a look at that too.
Right. When we look at that, this is maybe off the topic of budget slightly, but when we look at something like that, do we look at other websites that are available? Like, I know that in this area where groundwater is a big deal, there's a huge groundwater site already there that
Yep.
you can link to and find all kinds of information.
Yeah, we would definitely not recreate the point to. I also know that our Angie Hong at the East Metro Water Resource Education Program has a lot of resources around groundwater as well that we could just better connect to our site.
Yeah, okay. All right. That would be funds well spent, would be to look at what's available, how we would link into it, and what we might want to do to supplement that.
And on that as well, I need to check in with Ramsey County, but I believe that they are considering pursuing a groundwater plan again. This was something, so the counties are the ones that do their groundwater plans. Washington County has a groundwater plan. Ramsey County had a draft, but it was never approved by the county board. And that was years ago now. And it's my understanding that they're at least in discussions about completing a plan. So we would definitely be a partner in that and be involved in that. So it could be a big ask too, as far as, meetings and just kind of fleshing out what our responsibilities and roles would be under that county plan as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, yeah, so we will need funds for that. And I see Public Art has a special section in the stewardship program now. Okay.
That's what I was thinking. If you thought that sounded okay, we would have a certain dollar amount that we would allocate for public art funds for the year, so that you and the public have an understanding of how much we would be committing to that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And do we have any idea, maybe this is probably premature, but you noted that we would need a lot more resource for the communications program for next year too.
Yeah, it's possible that I don't have an idea of funds or percentages yet at this point. But I think that she's definitely ramping up her program, as we talked about, as we make website changes. Some of that will be done this year, but there might be things that we need to finish up in 2022. So she'll be outlining more specifically what she thinks her needs are for the August meeting.
Okay, sounds good. And are you creating a session for special projects like the Phelan daylighting project?
Yeah, I was thinking we item to our general fund. For, yeah, I don't know what to call it, special project collaborations or partner projects, or, something that we could pull from. And I probably wouldn't include a whole lot into that budget line item, but then it can be called out specifically in our general fund instead of in our CIP funds.
And the one other comment I had that you actually asked about in here was funding outside programs. To me, those have paid off very well for us. So I would support that spending.
Yeah, I think every year we take a look at those just to make sure that they're still the service and the benefits that we would expect from them, and they really are high performing, well done, programs that do benefit our work.
Right. Okay, other comments on the budget item? Job team, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, we can dig in more next month.
Yeah, well, it's an ongoing dig in. So the one thing you did mention in there, which I was pleased to see, was the fact that you were going to be planning on hosting a public works forum for our partners in the area, like Flamo and Shoreview and County and stuff, to see how we might be better able to work together. Will funds for that be reflected in our budget, or how will that work out? Because in fact, I would also say when you do that, I would like to know when it is, because if it's possible, I'd like to listen in on that.
Sure. Yeah, we hold those public works forums. I mean, we still hold them. Well, during our watershed management plan update, it was monthly, and then we kind of moved to quarterly or twice a year. So those are regular meetings that they expect to hear from every once in a while. So we had one in like March or February to talk about the flood risk projects. So yeah, I can definitely extend the invite to you as well. We don't really need funds at staff time. I know BAR has some money set aside in there. I forget what the line item is called, education or communications and education budget under the engineering funds for support of those meetings when we have those and need them to present or bring information to the Public Works Forum. But otherwise it's staff time. And then, from that meeting, we'll probably, maybe you're asking for if we're going to add funds for the maintenance piece, or were you asking about the Public Works Forum?
Well, I was, when you have a deal like that, and I guess part of it is sort of what I've talked to various people about, is that, okay, we seem to have responsibility for how the water moves from the top of the watershed to the bottom watershed, but all sorts of parts and pieces of this, like West Vadnais Lake and culverts and Shoreview and things like this, are the responsibility of other people. We've been successful in cleaning out lakes. They reimburse us for us. If there's stuff that we consider to be critical to our mission, should we be budgeting to work with them to get it done and get it done anyway, whether they have money or not? Or how do we look at that? That's more my point.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I do is have the Public Works Forum and see what their needs and what their
Thoughts are.
Approach it as far as how they view their infrastructure and their responsibilities around it. Certainly, if I said that the district was going to clean culverts for them, they're going to say, great,
Yeah.
But I do think that they need to hold some responsibility for that, for their system as well. So that's where the collaboration and being inviting them to partner with us through, we pay for, like we do the ponds, and they reimburse us. There is a real benefit to them to do that in overhead and contracting and all that, those kinds of things. So I think we can add money to our maintenance, or at least a placeholder for that. Ideas of how much more we would do with our cities. see what their desires are and their needs are, and then kind of keep talking about that as we move forward in our budget process over the next several months.
Because again, I look at all the investments, successful investments we've made in attempting or actually managing the water levels throughout the watershed. But yet there are pinch points that we don't have responsibility for. And the question is, do we just say that's the way it is? Or do we say we made these investments and we may need to spend a little extra money to make sure that they're successful in spite of the fact that other people aren't doing their job like they're supposed to? And it's not that they're mean or evil or something, they just might not have the budget to do it, and that might affect the success of our investments.
Yeah, I think that, again, there's another sort of, need as we look at that, at what's a critical pinch point.
Yep.
That is something, I think you're right, that the district would be wanting to step in and make sure it's complete. But if it's, there's a lot in that system that wouldn't be considered critical, so that it would be important, I think, to identify what would be considered critical and what wouldn't be.
Yep. This would make sure, we do have sufficient funds to make sure that we're successful with these things. So, okay.
Yeah, that has his hand up too.
Yeah, I think we need to be really careful about that, because if we jump in and help one city with an issue that they've let lapse and we think is critical, other cities are going to say, hey, you helped Little Canada do this.
Right.
Why aren't you providing those funds to Maplewood or North St. Paul or whatever?
Right.
The cities know by our plan that they have responsibilities, and they have their system, we have our system, and they have requirements under their MS4 permit. I don't think we can offer to just do things unless if it's an issue that all cities are having trouble with, and they're having trouble finding funds to do that task, then I think we can jump in and say, well, maybe the district can get involved in a way that we can cost share or whatever. And that's where we got into this issue of priority street sweeping at one point. We said, that's an issue that affects all our lakes. We can identify the priority watersheds. The district maybe could cost share by either providing the right equipment or funds or whatever. And even though we raised that issue, the cities didn't feel at that point that it was a viable program, something that they were really interested in. But I think that's something we need to really approach carefully. And I think the Public Works Forum is a great way to really deal with that.
I agree. I just wanted to make sure we're prepared for success. So,
yeah,
got it. Okay. Other comments on the budget process? No sustained resistance. We can move to the next item. Okay, thanks, Tina. That
Yeah. Yep.
forward the next month. Okay, now we're on item number 8, board issues and policies. There are 2 things on there, which are PFOAs, PFAS, whatever you want to call them. And Alan, 2 issues that I know Pam is extremely active on. So the question at this point is, and we'll take the first issue, PFSs, PFOAs, PFAS, or whatever you want to call it. What should the board be doing? What does the board think that we should be doing on this issue? Because there are all kinds of people involved with this. I know that Pam submitted a link to an article about what the Wisconsin DHS is doing. It's a confusing area as far as this goes, but what obligation do we have as a board? Does the board feel that we have? And what kind of information do we need to develop a policy moving forward if we are going to move forward with these items?
Pam has her hand up.
How's your hand up?
In the past, we had discussed, and I thought we had agreed to initially just getting information, gathering it, and figuring out who does what and who's responsible for what, and, just getting what information is known and providing information and links to the community and to the board and staff in that regard. And we had also, for me personally, I'm curious to know, I know there's a gap but others would have say there's no gap. We had talked about, well, what else is in those contaminated sites in our watershed district? And Cliff had said we could probably just pull up, or maybe Tina too said, the old report from when it was in Oakdale declared a Superfund site. But I believe we don't really know everything that was dumped in there. And so I'd be curious to know that. And if we could, investigate that, I would be very happy and curious to know.
Okay, the question I would have to the board on that is, is that part of our remit as a watershed board, or isn't it? I don't know at this point.
Yeah, I really agree with Pam that it's an issue. The trouble is, it's an issue of federal and state concern, and they regulate that activity and they implement the programs to remediate that problem. We don't have any role in that, and I think we wouldn't be able to identify the issues. They're already known, and I think if anything, it's probably we have maybe an information education kind of a role. Maybe if, for instance, back when Oakdale's was first discovered, that the plume of the PFAS issue was as large as it was, and it was actually much further to the west into Oakdale than we originally had known. They were having difficulty acquainting all the residents that this is an issue and that they should take steps to protect themselves. The city was way into that issue, and they actually implemented filtration systems on their city water. But there were things that residents could do to protect themselves on top of that. And I think they were getting information, but information from several sources is usually beneficial. And I mean, we can't, at this point, there would never be another industry, I don't think, that would ever be a what do you call it, a polluter using PFAS or PFAS. And those are chemicals now that are heavily regulated by the state and or prohibited. So it's kind of a, what do you call that, is when they're historical issues. So they're in the system already, and they're having to deal with their impacts. So even though I think it's a real important issue, other than acquainting ourselves with what the significance is, I'm not sure if we really have a role in dealing with the impacts. That's my personal opinion.
It'd be good. I agree with, I think the first step is to find out what information is out there and who's regulating it, and are there gaps? How do we know if there is a role for us or not if we don't know who's doing what? So I think just finding out who's in charge of everything and who's doing what, and I agree there's lots of good information out there that, like, the EPA has some really nice detailed reports, and there's things we can find and learn about. But I think we should, are there gaps? I think it would be good for us to find out. Or
Yeah,
at least at the very least, just find out who is in charge of everything and who's regulating it, and what's the history, just what is the story? I'm sure somebody's already written the whole story, and just having a link to it so we can all find out.
Yeah, and I can share some links and information that I have for you as well. Staff has been, in conversations, with Battle Creek concerns and other, we talked about that a few months back. So we do have some information from the PCA on that as well that I can share.
Okay, so how do we want to, by the way, does Maud have any position on this for watershed districts?
No, I don't believe they've addressed that at all. What Cliff was saying, that it's a state, federal as well, concern.
Right.
I kind of look at this a little bit like the chlorides issue. I know this is a little different, but, we know it's a concern. our role in it was more for the state to determine a statewide plan. Well, they ended up doing a metro-wide plan, but metro plan that we could, buy into and share with our cities and our residents. But that's kind of how I see us collaborating with the state agency to, where we need to. That's still to be determined what our role is.
Okay, from my point of view, I agree with, although I understand it as an issue, but I do agree with Cliff on the fact that I don't see a clear role for the watershed district in it, except for potentially education, because as Pam noted, it may be a part of a groundwater situation that you may want to have references to. But the question at this point is what, and I'll just ask Pam, what would you like staff or Bar or somebody to do to present to the board for action or by us?
I don't know, for me, I think it would be good to have somebody from staff put together a 10-minute presentation to educate us on the issue and what is known about the who regulates what and what the quick story is and where we're at today and what the rules are in place for it. And then maybe have our communications person start developing an information spot on the website for a groundwater section and perhaps within that a PFAS section. Something like that off the top of my head, I think would be a good thing to do.
Gina, do you have a concept of how you would do that or who would do that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can put that together, between us, and I know there's some Bar staff that have been real involved in that, those discussions as well. So I certainly think we could do a general. I've seen a general presentation about it that I think would be good for the board, and I think I can pull that out for you.
Okay, does that give you sufficient marching orders to bring it up as a topic at one of the future meetings?
Yeah. Yep.
All right, does anybody else from the board have comments or something that they would like to say on this issue? With that, we'll move on to item B, which is the use of alum. And Pam, you sent around a overview report on aluminum, which is a little different than well, it's not different than alum. It's what alum is at its base. We used it in. I know in the last meeting, Pam, you said shut down the Tanner's Lake thing, and it shut down itself. So you have more influence than what we thought. But the question is that everything I read about alum is that it's a legitimate way to manage phosphorus pollution in bodies of water, but there are some risks. And so my question is, how does the board want to approach their policy and their approach to the use of alum as a tool in our work box of ways to control the pollution in the lakes around here?
I just want a couple points I'd like to throw in there too. Is like one, I want to point out that our alum treatment facility was an experimental situation that we invented. It wasn't something that was done prior. And I think it'd be helpful and useful for the board to recognize and appreciate how much volume of alum we're dumping in to the system. There's these two giant cisterns that are, I don't know, 10 or 12 feet tall and 5 feet in diameter that are filled and refilled several times a year. And it's a lot of aluminum being dumped into the system. And I'd also like to raise the attention to all board members that the alum treatment facility has been incredibly effective at reducing the phosphorus in accumulating in Tanner's Lake. And if I recall, like, I don't even know, 8 years ago, we were talking about how the lake has gone from eutrophic to it's starting to be mesotrophic or something. And there was some question as to, do we still need it? Do we still need it as much? And so I'd like us as a board to, and staff and engineers to consider is there an opportunity for us to ramp this down and perhaps stop using it? Or my preference would be to not use it at all, because I, as a scientist and as the scientific literature I provided to you, there's an awful lot of toxic effects associated with alum, and there's alternative ways for us to achieve our goals besides dumping in housefuls of alum into the pond each year. So that's where I stand on it. And I will continue to never vote in favor of using alum even to treat a lake, because I'm very concerned about the toxic effects of alum in the environment and for people.
Dave? Other comments, Cliff or Val or Diane?
Diane has her hand raised.
Yeah, I wasn't around when it was proposed, so don't know if the experimental nature of it or if there was some time to evaluate it. But I would support going forward every time we have a new proposal where alum is recommended or considered, that we just be given all of the options and why staff is recommending that particular option, which could be everything from cost to effectiveness or history or whatever. So I think that would be helpful for me.
Okay.
I think that's a reasonable request as well. Mhm.
Pam mentioned a review of the fact that the Tanner's Creek was an experimental thing and maybe items have changed. Will we have a review of that? I know that Eric has talked to us before about it, but will he be able to review that?
I think, every year we have stats, all the data, all the monitoring that goes into that. Thinking about whether or not we still need it, or how the lake would react if we dialed back or stopped using it. I don't think we haven't looked at that before, and I'm not sure exactly. I mean, I guess there's modeling. Erin, do you have anything to add to how we would even evaluate what the impacts could be from stopping the use of the alum facility?
I guess I'd have to think about that a little bit. I mean, one thing is we do have constant, well, not constant, but very frequent monitoring data. And there have been time periods where the alum plant has been taken down or offline or whatever. So we could try to look back. I mean, that's a little tricky because there's not like an instantaneous result. So, but just off the top of my head, that's one thing that we do have is monitoring data on the lake. Modeling, we probably could do something there. I guess I'd like to think a little bit about that, but we could certainly do some digging.
And just Cliff, I know you have your hand up, but I just want to, as you're talking about modeling, I think it'd be useful to model, what if we replace the pond with a sand filtration system, for example, and if you modeled that, and could that be a way to maintain control moving forward instead of alum, or some other ideas you might have?
Okay. Cliff, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I want to respond to a couple of things. One is that it wasn't entirely experimental. It was a known technology. I guess at the scale we used it was relatively new. But we have a lot of data. You can go back and look at all the years we've done it now, and it's extremely helpful. It's one of the best. It's been shown to be probably the best management practice to reduce phosphorus loading that we've ever done in the district, no matter how expensive the project was. And this was, if you look at the cost per pound of phosphorus removed, this is one of the lowest BMPs we've ever implemented. So it's very effective and it's very cost effective. The other thing is, and Pam and I have had these discussions a lot in the past, and I'm sorry to disagree, Pam, but even though we put a lot of alum in the system, it's into surface water. A large part of it is captured in the pond and we clean out the pond. A little bit of it moves downstream, and we've measured that there is an increase in aluminum downstream, but it goes into the lake. which is extremely diffused. And from the articles I've read in the past, most of the known toxic effects of alum have been from direct exposure and exposure to high doses, which in the lake, if you were to go in the main body of the lake and measure the amount of aluminum, it's extremely small. I mean, I think you could probably drink the lake water and never have an impact. There are instances where people have ingested alum. There's alum in pickles. I mean, there's alum in a lot of the system that people are exposed to much more than lake water. Most lake water you're exposed in your skin, but you don't ingest it. So I think the risks are extremely low, and I've never seen anything where people say we shouldn't be treating alum in our stormwater because it's dangerous to the public. And when we put it in a lake system, it's spread on the surface, typically during times of the year when the lake isn't heavily used, and it settles into the sediment of the lake, and people definitely don't eat the sediment of the lake. So, and it binds the phosphorus in the bottom of the lake. So I think it's very. I totally agree. We should be looking at other options. I don't have any qualms with that. And there are a few other options. They're just typically not as effective. But like Diane said, I think when we're in a situation where we want to look at this again, I think we ought to look at all the options and look at the relative effects, cost effectiveness, as well as effectiveness, and make a decision based on that. So,
And I just want to point out to this, I'm giving you the science, the science is always 20 years ahead of the practice. And so, I've been harping on this for 20 years, and I'm hopeful that the science is going to catch up to policies. And so, for example, alum is used in a lot of vaccines in a little tiny dose. But, the neuroscientists getting to the immunologists to get them to use and to develop different adjuvants instead of alum to be used is like starting to happen. And so, but alum's the only FDA approved adjuvant right now. So they're working to get other ones. And it's amazing when I go to immunologist talks and I go to a lot of vaccine talks, and I'm like, what about the toxic effects of alum in your vaccine? And they have no idea. So I'm showing you the science. I gave you a beautiful review of all the science that clearly shows that it's a toxic problem there's a lot of it affects a lot of things and organisms and humans in a lot of different places. It's not only a neurotoxin, it can affect your endocrine system, it can affect a lot of things. And also just want to point out one thing. So for example, now I have a friend who has ulcerative colitis, and she's trying to deliberately eliminate all of the aluminum as much as possible in her system. So she's getting aluminum-free deodorant. She's using aluminum-free baking soda or baking powder, concerned about diet because she has holes in her gut and cannot, it will be absorbed and not, it would be a problem for her. And so it kind of can depend on an individual person's health and how well they would be able to, how much they would absorb or be able to eliminate. So I just want to say it is emerging as it's coming forward, and I'm just hopeful we'll be aware of it, and hopefully the science will convince you and the concerns. I mean, for me, I'm a pathobiologist. I study the basis of human disease. And so it's clear to me that this is causes harm to people and animals. So I totally agree with Cliff. It's a super effective. It's very effective. And it is by the water scientists and viewed as a very promising thing to use. But I think, the review article I showed you shows that I don't think the water scientists are necessarily aware of all of this literature that has been accumulating over the last 80 years that demonstrate the problems that could potentially be associated with it as well. So I'll stop with that.
Okay, as a board though, do we need a review of this more than what we have to decide on what our policy is? I know we're now conducting an experiment, I guess, on aeration to look at that as how we would implement that as an alternate to using this. The North American Lake Management Association has put out a nice position paper on it, sort of acknowledging the things that you were talking about, Pam, but yet also acknowledging the trade-offs of getting lakes clean at a reasonable cost, which you might not be able to do if you don't do this. Do we need a review of Allen by staff and BAR to set a policy for the board? Or what do we want to do moving forward? Because it's an issue that comes up every time. And I know Pam is the one that brings it up, and also know she's going to bring it up. I've traveled with her. It always comes up. I would like to be more clear on how the board totally feels about this. So as we're going ahead, if we're looking at clearing a lake, should Allen even be an option? Or should it be an option that we trade off of other things? I mean, that's kind of where I'm looking at with this.
Diane has her hand up, and then Cliff.
Yeah, this is so far beyond anything that I can understand in detail, but what I do know and what science has been showing is that ever smaller parts of these toxins can have an effect. And yes, they can be individual. So, because that is a piece of the science that we all haven't caught up to in policies, we do need to keep our eye out for any additional information, and also, as I said before, for alternatives, because the tiniest pieces are causing problems for various people as they get more information about their effects.
The only thing I was going to add is that I think it might be useful if we, as members of national organizations like National Lake Management Association, whatever that was.
North American Lake Management.
North American Lake,
Association,
yeah. And the Water Environment Federation and a few others that we get involved in periodically, is to put the word out to those people that this is a concern, and they ask them to also respect that it's a concern among local lake managers, and see if they will take it up as well, and at least be cognizant of the potential issue, and hopefully come out with some guidance at some point. And even EPA or PCA.
Okay, so as a board, what do we want to do next? I guess is my question. Or do we not want to do anything? Or we just want to bring this up, or should we?
Well, I think we've given staff some direction, in that whenever we're considering alternatives for lake improvement, that we
Right.
Don't just jump to Allen, that we consider alternatives and consider the potential impacts.
Right.
And then I would like the issue of staff talking to other agencies and organizations as well, to bring this issue up and see if we can get some better guidance at the local level.
Val has his hand up as well.
Could you say more about, I mean, is it within the board's, can the board release position papers out of curiosity? I didn't actually get to read the position paper. I'll be perfectly direct. I didn't see a reference to it, and it was surprising when Pam brought it up. But I was very interested to hear that, and I was curious. And unfortunately, I don't have the history like you guys do, so I kept mostly quiet. But I'm trying to piece it together over time. It sounds cost effective and good, but I'm just curious: is there a time point where the board would ever consider a position on this particular issue that we would publish, similar to what other organizations have done, and what would drive us to consider that as an option? Not saying that it needs to be, I just need to understand, I guess, as a general question.
Yeah, I think the board could, if they chose to develop a policy, like Larry's saying, I think that would be the terminology I would use for if the board were to make a decision that they want staff to follow a certain order of the board, that a policy document would be the way to go. And that policy document then could state you know, if there was support or not support for using alum for our projects. And then it could also state that, you know, the alternatives, you know, requesting that alternatives be brought for projects. That's something we're already doing, but it could be written out into that policy as well.
I just like the idea that we're investigating these other technologies and we're always revisiting different mechanisms to do that. That really makes me happy. I was trying to figure out, it's always nice to publish on here's some other things that we're considering, but right now when you look at the intelligent use of taxpayer dollars, this might be the best thing, but we are ongoing searching and just continuing that public awareness of here's some problems. And is that it, to me, feels like a minimum that we have to do is show them that we're trying other things. But it's my 2 cents.
Yeah, nope, those are good comments.
Pam, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just was also, we already talked when we started talking about perhaps as staff could, you know, they always give us an annual report on the alum facility, and maybe this year when that time comes that maybe we have a little 10-minute presentation. So the new members of the board can be sort of given a history of, you know, just to get us all up to speed on what the history is. And then maybe at that point we could discuss and look at, well, this is the water quality trends, where the water quality started, where it is now, what are alternatives. We were talking about earlier, like maybe Aaron could do some modeling and then come back to us with that, what the modeling showed, and we could have that as a discussionary point sometime in the future.
And also to mention, some of you know, a while back, we did pull together a general discussion about alternatives to alum and sort of some of the trade-offs. And that's something that some, but not all of you have seen because you've all come on board at different times. So that's something we could also put back in the discussion in future months, just talking about what are the other things that we know of right now that can be done and what, you know, how effective or expensive do they tend to be. So more information that's available.
Can I ask a tangential question to what Aaron just highlighted? We had talked prior about having like an internal web service for just the staff and the board members, because really there's just so much evidence and history here. It'd be nice to locate it in a central place. I'm not saying that this caught me off guard, but like I'd love to be better educated coming into these types of discussions, especially with the passion clearly board members have been showing here. So has there been any progress on that internal website at all, Tina? I saw that we're moving to Teams, and maybe that's a good use of Teams, but I'll pause.
Yeah, we'll be using Teams mostly as a staff, I think. I don't know how much the board will need to. They're moving our, and you got those emails about Outlook moving to Office 360 platform. But what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so that there is a board management website system that houses documents and would be where you get your board packets and all those things. So I am getting a quote for a price that what that costs. I don't think it'll be cost prohibitive, but I would like to move in that direction probably coming this fall. So then we will house, so we'd have all the board packets would be available there. Any reports or presentations that were given at board meetings would be placed in there. Any policy documents, all of our, you know, our handbooks, anything that guidance around governance, all of that could be in there for the board to be able to retrieve. You know, this time. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just wondering why we would want to make that only available to the board. I would think the public might be interested in those documents as well. And
it's more of an,
as we've seen, we've got a lot of in the last couple of years, we suddenly have a lot of interested community members in topic areas. And I think that all the information we might want to see, they might want to see too. So
yeah, everything will be public information, and most of it would probably also be on our website for public consumption. This is more like an intranet, like for the insiders of, you know, to have it all be available at your fingertips. And we can, that's what the point of that website is, and that management system for that. But it's certainly all those things are available on our website too, under our document library. It's just maybe more structured under board meeting kind of formatting. than the website.
On the website, actually, as it exists now, there are filters. And you can go through and filter on technical reports. You won't find very much, I can tell you that. But that would be a way to do it, just as a suggestion, would be as you're posting these things, if you have filters, all this stuff would come up. But anyway, that's what I look for when I'm looking for stuff. So is then it the position generally of the board that when we review the Tanner's Lake facility, as we do every year, we also review our situation on Allen and have a discussion about how we want to move forward with that?
I will say too that I think that there's two tracks. There's the Tanner's alum facility and use of alum in Lake or
Okay.
Lake. So as we discuss that, I think there are two things that we need to discuss or talk about. Clearly, if the board chooses to not use alum anywhere, then that is that decision. But when we're reviewing the data and looking at the monitoring, there's two different things there. I think we need to look at separately.
Okay. I take that point, but I would like to get, personally, I would like to get to a point where we make a decision on what we want to do with Allen. Because I also realize at some point you may have a lake that needs treatment and you can't afford to do it any other way from that. Then we have to decide, are we willing to take that risk? So it's a risk analysis at that point. But it needs to be based, as Pam has so often said, it needs to be based on science. The other thing I did get Pam out of reading, and I read that document a couple of times to make sure I had it all in my head, is that, you know, aluminum exists anyway. It comes out of the hills. There's some level it's going to exist, do it or not. Part of my question would be treating an area without alum, how much does that change the natural environment anyway? And that may be a way we want to look at this too. So it's just kind of talking about things, and Aaron and Tina, you may want to kind of think through those sort of things too, as to what kind of guidance can the board give itself when it's looking at these things.
And also, I think there needs to be a little bit of discussion around the fate of the alum in both the alum treatment facility and in lake use. The alum, the ability of the alum to be in contact with people and its ability to be absorbed in the water column are different in both situations. So I think, Aaron, if you could have, when this put together, just talk about, this is how it's applied, this is the use of it, this is how it's assimilated, this is the final fate of the chemical. Not chemical, it's a mineral.
So bottom line, what I'm getting out of the board is that we would like a follow-up session on alum. Again, this topic was on the board topic to try to sort out how we wanted to approach this, not to finish the discussion. But what I'm hearing is that we want to get together a discussion for the board about what our position is on alum going forward, short-term, long-term, and what your recommendations are and how we should approach this issue. So that we do it before we have to make a decision, really, is what I'm, because at some point you're going to say, this is how we have to clean up the lake, and it would be better to know what basis we're working off of before we get to that point.
Yep, no, I think that's wise. It's good. And Val, just as a point, the article that they're referring to was emailed out to the board shortly after the last meeting. So
Right.
I should have included that link in the packet too as well.
Well, I'll be honest, I read it, but I just don't have the depth of knowledge to, to
I
make
just
a lot
want
of
to
sense.
make sure that you saw it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's what we'll do at a future meeting, let's say in 2 or 3 months, that'll give you time to pull it together, because I know you have other things to do.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Is that okay with you, Pam? Yep, okay, good. Excellent, thank you. Okay, that takes us to page 72, which is the administrator's report.
Yes. Let's pull this up here. So I have some meetings attended and upcoming meetings. I did want to make a note and make sure that you all saw, did you all get the email about the MOD summer meeting coming up?
Summer meeting, yes.
Okay, so that's July 22nd. Yeah,
Right.
I have a correction. The Metro Mod meetings are off by a day.
oh,
The July one's the 20th, and the October meeting is the 19th.
okay.
They're always on Tuesdays rather than Wednesdays.
Oh yeah, I don't know how I got off on that.
I got it that way too. So earlier, I think a date went out wrong earlier.
Okay. I will make sure I change that for the next one. But so the Metro Mod meeting is July 20th. And the mods meeting is the 22nd. So you get a day in between, I guess.
Yeah, I honestly, because I think Mark sent out this thing that said it was on the 20th. So there must have been some other misinformation. So
Yeah, I'm not sure where I got that date from.
Okay.
But you're right, it's always on Tuesdays. So
I got it, yeah, on Tuesdays.
yeah.
The other, as long as we're talking about it, the note from Emily said that the winter meeting started on the 1st of December.
That is correct. Let me look. Oh, well, yeah. So typically the Wednesdays are for administrators and then the actual meeting kicks off on the 2nd. So I'm not sure exactly what their plans are this year yet.
Yeah, and I don't think it's maybe clear to them, but it sounds like it's going to be more in person than.
Yes, it will be in person. They are planning in person. And we can talk about this maybe in the coming months, but we'll probably request that we move the December board meeting to the 8th
Okay,
to accommodate that.
is okay. Yeah, let's make, so we give ourselves time. Let's make that decision at the next meeting if we're not prepared to make it at this meeting. Because I'd rather get it moved earlier than later.
Yeah.
And that's kind of
I'm
what I was thinking too.
Yeah, I'm welcome to take that. If you need more time to think about that or how we want to approach that, that's gonna make that decision now.
I
And
think it's gonna be a conflict either if it's remote or in person. So I would we move the December board meeting to December 8th.
And I would second that. Any discussion? Okay, Tina,
Roll call. Yep, so Cliff,
Aye.
Diane,
Aye.
Pam,
I'm sorry, I'm still at my calendar. I just got the mod meeting logged in for hopefully the right day. I started changing a date for, I'm not quite there yet. So we're changing what meeting to when?
Yeah,
This
the
is the
December
December
1st
board
meeting.
yeah.
Yeah, December 1st was the board meeting, but that's the start of the mod annual meeting in Alexandria.
Move it to the 8th.
So we're gonna move it to the 8th. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that works for me.
Okay, that's an
Person
aye.
aye.
Oh, aye, sorry, aye.
Val
Aye.
and Larry.
Aye. Okay,
Thank you.
yep, so we need to get an, well, we'll get an announcement on that. Okay, moving right along with your administrator's report.
Yes, so I had some ongoing updates there. If anyone has any questions about any of those things that I'm just working on continually as the time goes on. And then I had the wetlands workshop outline. I'd like to hear any feedback or thoughts on that.
From my point of view, I would like to go light on the education on wetlands themselves and heavy on the regulations. What are we required to do? What are we allowed to do? So that we can start to have a discussion around what our policies are about things like managed A wetlands, and what does preserve and protect mean? We kind of ran into this with Victoria Shores too. What can we do? What can't we do? That's more what I'm looking at for the workshop.
Yep. Thanks.
Can I also provide On the district policy rules and goals, will you also be covering maybe the tools, monitoring tools, and those types of things, intervals, or how do we judge the health, the wellness of watersheds as well as part of that rules, goals, and policy piece? Is that going to be covered there?
Yeah, we can talk about, we probably will up in the number one, we can talk about how we assess wetlands for those different management categories. And then I think, yeah, it would lead into a discussion around how those categories impact the policy rules and goals. And we can talk too about how, our reassessment and how how often we would look at those or how often they change or we would expect them to change and have those discussions as well.
Yeah, okay, good. It just didn't pop out at me on where that would fit into the conversation. So that I think that would be helpful.
Okay. I did have one question, sort of back up on your meetings. How did the meeting with the Twin Lake Association go?
So it was the Twin Lake. Was that June 3rd? Seems like forever ago.
I know.
That wasn't our big meeting.
This is as long as you can have between.
That was a follow-up.
That was a follow-up, yeah. So that was just
Okay.
different members. That was with Bert and Melissa. So
Okay.
so it was actually a really good meeting though, because it was good follow-up from our bigger meeting and then led to some discussions with the City of Little Canada, and Paige is going to be getting some contact from them if she hasn't already about wetland or about rain gardens potential throughout their subwatershed, as well as their Twin Lakes annual association meeting at the end of August. They're looking for some resources for that meeting as well for lakeshore owners. So again, I'll bring up Angie Hong. I did suggest that they, and I can help connect them with Angie Hong, who has a number of resources and is really good at working with community groups like that too. And I know she has a number of resources for lakeshore owners that would be helpful for the association as well. So I was going to say, I did not feel like it was feels like it was longer ago that we had that big meeting.
Right, yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else on the, Val has his hand up.
I had two things on the watershed workshop. Are you going to also get a chance to send out like a packet to read so we can have an engaged conversation prior, if possible?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, yeah, I'll have to think about what we would give to you ahead of time. Yeah, I think we can put together something for that. Yeah.
And the second question, in prior meetings, we talked about Ramsey County permitting kind of slowing us down a little bit. It seems like the heat on Ramsey County and this particular agreement is kind of subsided. Is the cadence or the progress it's making to your liking, or
yeah, I think
curious on there.
Yeah, I as I talked about last month too, I think there's a little slowdown or lag over the last couple of summer months. I think vacations and just connecting was a little bit harder, but I think that I don't see any problems with making progress on that before we use it again for our CIP or need it for our CIP maintenance again this fall.
Okay, yeah, that's more is my concern. Is I know it was a big deal coming into these meetings, and just figured just check in, see how it's going.
Yeah, it's a big deal because it holds up some projects sometimes. In fact, at their meeting yesterday, they just approved, as I understand it, us to be able to go in and work on the Grass Lake berm.
Yeah, we had to re-up the one so that we could do the replacement for the Grass Lake area. So that did go to their county board in the old form, in the usual form.
Right.
I think, and this kind of shows too that it has a lot to do with the time of year. I think because we're doing it normally doing it over the December timeframe and over the holidays, there's some lag and we miss some meetings that they cancel because of the holidays. So that timing does get pushed out, but I mean, obviously it's a bigger issue than that, but this time there was no delay in how that worked, so.
Good.
Um,
Okay. One other part of the administrator's report, I believe.
Yeah, Diane has her hand up, so I don't know if
I'm
she
sorry.
has-
Sorry, Diane. Yeah,
That's okay.
you moved over there on my screen. That's the
I'm
problem, is
just-
people move
I
around on the
go slow
screen.
here. On the wetland workshop, on the issue of what you could give us ahead of time, I just kind of looked down the agenda that you laid out, which I like, and any of the background documents. So when you talk about our roles and responsibilities, there's statutes, there's regulations, there's our 10-year plan, you know, maybe either list the links to those things or something like that. The definitions of the types and classifications where those are, just so we don't have to spend a lot of time reviewing stuff that some of us are quite up on and others are trying to catch up. But this isn't made up. There's reasons for all of these things. So to the extent that those are already set out somewhere, if you could make us a little packet with that kind of stuff, I think it would be really helpful.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yep, I will do that. And the date of that, just to talk again about that, Wednesday, August 18th, is that a good date for everybody?
And what about the time? It's fine for me, but the time would be more critical, I would think.
Yeah, if you wanted to, the same as the board meeting, sometimes when we do workshops, we do them a little earlier. I don't know why. I guess we just choose to, but if you want to keep it the same time as a board meeting, like 6:30, that would be fine as well.
And before we get to that, and it's kind of jumping topics, but I know when we discussed the workshop before, Cliff made the point, and I kind of agree with that workshops are more valuable in person. So we're going to talk about our back to whatever normalcy is process. But is the workshop one that we can start on the process to at least offer the ability to meet personally at the watershed offices?
Yeah, so that's definitely an option. As we laid out, I don't know if we want to just talk about that real quick. And as far as the August board meeting and workshop go, Pam, the date proposed is August 18th. It's the third Wednesday. If we want to keep it to the first and third, in this case, that helps a little bit with staff timing as well, having them spaced out between when we're preparing packets. But so we have the option, and Lauren can jump into if I misspeak, but we do have the option to continue, like I said in the packet, with virtual meetings through the end of August. You're allowed 3 times to do that between July 1st and August 31st or August 30th. So you would be allowed in that to have that workshop virtually, or we can meet in person. So I guess it's up to you. Even if we met in person, I would probably still broadcast it or show it through Zoom, and have it available for others that wish to attend. Lauren, the one thing I guess I'm not super clear on is if we have to allow residents to be present at the meeting location, or if we can say that we're going to be present, but visitors have to be virtual.
I think the meeting location does have to be open.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And this, so the new statute that was passed separates the rules based on whether it's a state entity or an other entity, which isn't all that helpful. But actually a state entity which our office believes that this district is a state entity. It's a product of state law. Doesn't have that medical exception rule, the 3 times rule. So really at any time under the statute, you can have mixed meetings. So long as the measures outlined kind of on the second page of that memo are met. So that means the public can show up at the meeting location and hear and see everybody, here for sure if they're virtual, that there's one member of the board in attendance at the physical location, and that notice is provided, just that some board members will be attending virtually. So we don't need to notice anyone's private location anymore. That's a change that's happened under the statute. So because the district qualifies as the state entity, it actually has greater flexibility to do online participation. But yeah, sorry, that was a long way to answer that. Yes, the meeting location should also be open to the public.
Should be open to the public without restriction on how many. I'm just thinking about our boardroom and the ability to have a lot of people. Not that this workshop necessarily would pull in a lot of people, but just thinking ahead about that. Is there any restrictions we can put in place for that?
I think for health and safety, you can always limit the number of people in that room, just like you would if there's a fire code or, for any other reason. We're not under any executive order though to say what needs to be done.
Yeah.
But I absolutely think the board can set a policy on how many should be in that room at any one time. And then another requirement then is just, of course, that anyone attending remotely can hear everyone in the room and know who's speaking. So as long as that can work logistically, then that's what the law allows you to do.
Okay, Val just commented in the chat that he has a conflict on the 18th.
Right. Okay, how do we want to address that?
So
Or,
to look at other dates.
yeah,
Val, your
Um,
time frame for your trip is, Cliff has.
It's
Yeah,
the 14th to the 28th.
Okay.
okay. I just want to let you know I'm going to be gone from the 1st through the 15th. So I'll miss the board meeting, but I'm going to try to tune in remotely.
well, and I know this is getting a little bit jumbled, but here's from reading the memo that we had, my thought is that we do the August board meeting remotely like we've done these before, just keep that rhythm. Try to do the workshop as a hybrid meeting going forward to give us a little practice without having the stress of a board meeting. And then when we need to, in September, go to the full hybrid board meeting. That doesn't answer the conflict of schedules, which seem to come up, but that's thought on how to try to get into this in the best possible way.
I think, so right now we have, it looks like the whole month of August, somebody would miss the workshop. Diane suggested in the chat that we talk about moving it to September.
Okay, well, then that gives it up as a test location.
Yeah.
Okay, I still feel more comfortable having the August meeting via Zoom, but that's just,
We could have a board social for a test.
There you go.
yeah, that's true. We could. That's
A short one.
Mhm.
Have 2 or 3 members come to the office, and some attend via Zoom to see how that works out.
Yeah, and then if we look at September, the date would be September 15th would be the 3rd Wednesday of that month. If anybody has any conflicts.
Fine with me.
School started. I'm here.
The board meeting is, yeah, early. It's actually, whoops. My dog just busted in. Board meeting is early. It's the Wednesday before Labor Day. So the 1st,
Yeah.
the 15th would be the workshop.
15 looks fine to me.
15th is fine with me, but I have a standing meeting on Wednesday from 3 to 4, so I wouldn't be able to attend until after 4:30.
Okay, that's fine.
Do we want to keep it at the regular board meeting time? Does that work for everybody?
Yeah, that
6:30?
sounds good.
Yep.
Yeah, Are we going to get fed this time too? I missed my sandwiches.
Yeah, we could do dinner, that's for sure. Feels like we should do something to celebrate too, but being in person. Okay.
Okay, so we've got that all settled. What's the board's position on the August meeting?
Well, I'll be tuning in remotely anyway, so
So
that would
just
work with
keep
me.
keep it on Zoom.
Yeah.
Sure, let's do one more
Meet
month.
the
huh?
requirements. Anybody have any other ideas or care or?
I'm fine with keeping it on Zoom, but if you want to try it for practice, I don't mind coming over for a live.
Yeah, I could do that too. And
So my suggestion, Larry, is that you and Tina decide how you want to do that, but it sounds like we'll have a Zoom option no matter what. And if you want to try a hybrid, we can do it with our computer. And if it doesn't work good, we just all sign on to Zoom.
yeah, because in general, as I recall, August is usually a pretty light meeting. So, well, okay, I'm okay with that. But how's the rest of the board feel? Yes, no? We try the hybrid in August. See how it works out.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah, it might be good because we'll have at least one board member that will be virtual too, so we can get that
Right.
experiences. Mhm.
Right. Okay. All right, we'll do that. Sounds good to me.
Okay, hybrid in August.
Hybrid in August.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, done with the administrator's report?
Yes, I didn't have anything else for
That
tonight.
was good, thank you. Excellent job. Number 10, the attorney report, Laura Ann, wherever you went. There you are. Sorry, we don't have that many people on, but it's hard to find you sometimes, yeah.
So I guess just piggybacking off of that discussion, does the board have any preference as to how we join the meeting? If you, would you prefer to have us in person? I just want your honest take on how you'd like us to participate.
Here, I'll give you my thought right off the top of my head. Since we're going to have this sort of be a trial meeting in August, have you do it remotely at that point and see how it works. And if we feel it's not working, we'll have you come in at the September meeting.
That sounds great.
I think I would ask, I mean, I'll certainly be there in person, but if you're okay with other staff being remote,
Yeah,
if that'd be okay too, unless there's a particular reason why a staff person would want to be in person if they're presenting and they would
right.
like in person. But I think for the most part, staff could participate virtually as well.
Yep, I agree.
And bar staff,
With August, sorry about that.
that's okay.
Val?
With August being the budget discussion, is there at all a risk that it's going to be a really engaging conversation, making that virtual difficult to try?
I don't think so.
Or are we?
I think one of the things
Cool.
is that we have large screens, TV screens in that boardroom. And so anybody who might be speaking to you from the
Be right there.
will be large. Yeah, I mean, we can adjust that as well. But The only thing is that the ones that are in the room will not be zoomed in on, right? And so I think you'll see, I can zoom in as close as I can get to get everybody, all the board members in view. And then I think like Lauren mentioned, identifying yourself when you speak would be helpful. Or Larry calling, on a
Right.
board member using their name so that, or staff, either way. So that everybody knows who's speaking if they can't quite see their mouse moving. Would be helpful.
We developed a set of guidances for hybrid approach that we use at work. I go in, 3 days a week. That's been extremely effective in terms of making sure that people get their voice heard. So I could forward you kind of our internal best practices.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'd appreciate that. And I know Aaron shared some documents with me too from BAR. So anything you have that would be helpful. And Pam, you sent those ones as well from the U. So those are all very helpful to help kind of guide how we do this.
Yeah. And I guess I would just to confirm, I think Tina, you were going to ask for clarification on this, but I appreciate Lauren's question because I had the same one about how you want BAR staff to attend. I mean, I think if there's a presentation, it makes sense, as you indicated, to be in. Do you just want that to be sort of at the discretion of staff depending on the agenda, or do you have a preference that's different for BAR?
My thought on that is that I've been surprised how well Zoom meetings have worked. I mean, I think it's difficult to have immediate interaction because the voices conflict with each other on Zoom, but that hasn't proved to be a problem because somebody, the chair recognizes the person and then you have the floor basically. And I think we've had some pretty engaging discussions, even though we've been all remote. I would prefer it in person, but it's worked. So I think if there's a presentation, I think you definitely want to be there because there's a lot of questions that come up during the presentation that I think are difficult to do via Zoom. But otherwise, if you're a resource there to call on if we have questions, I think that can be just as effective remotely.
I would just add to that. I think that even I Zoom all day long, and I Zoom on seminars with 200 people there, and it's really easy to set up presentations on Zoom and answer questions as you go along or when you're done. So I would say I have no problem with BAR staff coming remotely every time, even if there is a presentation. That's just my opinion.
My thought is that, again, for this meeting in August specifically, maybe even September, you guys try it remotely. We'll see how it works. We'll see how you feel about it too. And we may adjust as time goes on, and you may adjust. You may decide that we want to be there for whatever reason. Part of it has to do too, at some point, with team building, because at least some, if not all, of the board will be together interacting with each other. And if you're not there interacting with us, you're not going to be as honestly as much part of the team. It's just the way it is. So I think we ought to try it as lean as possible to start with and ramp up.
Sounds good to me. Pam has her hand up.
Yep.
Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. It came and went. Sorry. Sorry. Take my hand down.
It's okay. You take your hand down. All right. Okay. All right. So we'll move on with that.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. Good discussion. Thank you, Lorianne. Anything else from the lawyer's report, by the way?
Yes, so just at the last meeting, I reported that the claimants never followed up on the Target parking lot matter.
Right.
I think I must have jinxed us all because on the 21st, we got a letter from another woman who's claiming damage from the hole to her car. So that's been passed along to the insurer, and we haven't heard anything further, but I'll keep you updated if we do hear anything further on that claim.
What about the Tanner's? No, sorry. What about the I lost it here. Twin Lake litigation?
Yes, so I know that Tracy, my mom, had some correspondence earlier this month and looking into that, and I probably should have had a more detailed conversation with her before tonight's meeting, so I'm not up to date on that.
Okay, just curious as to what it was and where it stood. Okay. Thank you. Okay, now we're moving to project and program status reports. Anybody got anything to report or have any questions on these? Aside from me.
I had something. Oh,
Go ahead.
I had something on the Keller Channel fill and outlet modifications.
Mhm.
I was walking over there last week and I thought the two manholes on either side of the outlet to accommodate the controls for the adjustable weir are a lot higher than I thought they would be. And they're really very obvious and I think kind of intrusive, maybe by necessity. But I was wondering if there's been any thought given to what can be done to make them a little less intrusive. And I'm thinking either make it part of a public art project or plantings around it or something to somewhat screen them or make them more pleasant. Throwing it out there.
I've
talked to, I figure it's going to probably take a little bit for the natives to kind of grow up around in there, and then the paths for people fishing are going to kind of develop as they come. My first initial thought is I go get some paint and paint it to neutral color, because I think graffiti is going to be a big problem if we do some sort of nice mural or artwork that goes on there. That way we can just paint it again. I know Bill doesn't necessarily like the looks of them either, but in 2 years, I hope a lot of the veg will cover them up.
We did plant those slopes, Cliff, with a mix of seed and had volunteers plant plugs.
Okay.
But it was right in the beginning of the drought, so most of that plant material is suffering now, so we may have to go back in the fall and replant, so it's going to take a while.
And they should grow up high enough to at least substantially screen it.
Yeah, it'll soften the look.
Yeah,
for sure. I had a passerby mention having some sort of urban art competition, so he was thinking along the same lines as you are, which is I think it's a good idea.
But if the plants are going to cover up a lot of it anyway, then maybe it's. But I think they will be graffitied probably very quickly.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the cylinders facing the platforms will not be covered by plants. So I think that area is going to be fairly highly visible. So we may want to think about some art there.
Yeah. I thought some kind of a small mural or something might be interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I had a question on the surveying work that was being done. It seems like less than half of the people said it was okay to do an actual survey. My question is, did the survey in this area show any trend versus LiDAR? Like, was everything lower than we thought? Was it higher than we thought? Or was it mixed? And if it had a trend to it, are we adjusting our LiDAR?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good question. So it really mixed, but as we are reducing the data, the nice thing about the way that we collected the topographic information is that we use the laser scanner, which takes in information from everywhere the lasers can land. So in some instances, even if we didn't get permission to be on someone's property, we could still get topographic information just because the way that the data was collected. So that's one way we can supplement that LiDAR data. And the other is to look as we look at adjacent properties where we did get permission to see if the LiDAR should be adjusted in a way. So we'll be going site by site and trying to make informed use of the LiDAR data as we've discussed, depending on the other data that was collected nearby. So we're in the middle of that right now.
Okay, great. I was just curious about that.
Yep.
And from what Cliff was just discussing, are the Keller Weir and the Phelan outlet now in pretty much full operation?
This Friday will be the walkthrough of everything for Eric and I and Bar in the crew. So after, I'd say Monday of next week, end of day Friday, they will be in full operation, but they are working, but we're just getting the tutorial to run through everything.
Okay, great. Thank you. That answered that question. And there was a great report. Bill and his crew were out here behind our house planting stuff the other day on the wetland day. That's going along really well. My wife had some nice conversations with Bill about the way we could participate in this some way. So I appreciate that being done. There was a nice report in there too. I really like the way that came out.
Thanks, Larry.
I was also interested in the CAC report. That's pretty cool that the Master Water Steward is planning a tour of BMPs in Shoreview and making a map of that.
Yeah. It's a good project. That's the kind of things we like to see from our Master Water Stewards.
Do you know, are we getting that out on Nextdoor? Because I know Nextdoor just issued the thing about Carp Fest.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah, I'm assuming that is part of Lauren's plan and her communications plan for that, but I'll double check with her.
Yeah, I can jump in there, Tina.
Okay.
She said she's going to try, if we get a district account. I don't know about those details, but I live in Shoreview as well as the Master Water Steward, so we can post it on our accounts as well.
Yeah, we should be. So we are getting a district account on Nextdoor, and that should be happening shortly. I'm not sure the timing of that or how much it takes to get finalized, but
My guess is it may have already happened because Nextdoor came out with something from Lauren about Carp Fest, about the carp catching contest and for kids. That just came out this afternoon.
Oh, great. Well, then we're all getting set
Maybe
up.
it's implemented.
Perfect. Good.
Tina, how does one, I was trying to explore different ways to accelerate learning. I mean, going with this water steward, is that a public engagement where somebody can just jump in and do that July 14th walkthrough with them, or?
Yeah, so they are going to do a tour on the 14th. I haven't seen, where's Paige? Do you know more details about signing?
Yeah, so I can send you, Val. I don't know where that actually is posted. It should be on our website somewhere, but I can send you the direct link if you need it. But yeah, it's for anyone. There's 4 sites that we're going to on the 14th. That'll be a guide. It's self-driven. You drive yourself, and we'll go to these 4 sites. And then after that, it will be published 12-site driving tour where you can go any point and just look at some BMPs around Shoreview.
It seems like the water stewards, as I've read through some of the packet information, are just a great resource and partner for this particular organization. I'm curious, are we using them to their fullest potential? Or are there other things that we could throw their direction, to help us out in terms of like education or in terms of evaluating things? I don't know. I know speaking as a resident on Twin Lake, I based off of some of the content showed them, there's a adopted drain. There's all these different resources that they weren't aware of, and they're finding new ways to be engaged that I just think is super cool. And so I just curious. It seems like it's a wealth of resource, and are we using it?
So the Master Water Stewards program, it's called Minnesota Water Stewards. So it used to be called Master Water Stewards, and they changed their name. That's run through the Freshwater Society. And so we partner with them to sponsor residents in our watershed district to put them through the Minnesota Water Stewards training. And so we sponsor residents. They go through an extensive training that we also, Paige and Sage and others do part of the training. So it's very localized and specialized to our district when they're learning about watershed management. And then as part of their commitment to us, because we sponsor them, they're committed to volunteering, a certain amount of hours every year continue to keep up their certification as a water steward. And so we have projects and programs, and they're volunteering and they're sprinkled in all over. They have to do a capstone project as the finalization of their program to be certified. And sometimes, like in this case, she's doing the tour. In other cases, they actually build a project. They do a rain garden. They work with their neighbors to do a cleanup, some sort of activity for their capstone project. But then they do continue to volunteer with us and work with us quite heavily. Many of our Waterfest volunteers were water stewards as well.
And I think it's just such a unique outreach type of thing where I was hoping, like, as a board member, just to tie in and get to meet some of them periodically. It's always unique to hear their point of view and what they do.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a good idea. And we should talk to Lauren too about doing kind of spotlights on our water stewards as well, so that there's more information about them.
Yeah, I'd like to add too that there's several on the CAC already, and many of them that have been members for a while now, certified for a while, volunteer a lot in watershed plantings and CAC, and offer to do other things. Paige and Sage and Lauren are all connected with those people. Sage uses them a lot, as well as the master naturalists. They've been a tremendous resource over the years.
Also would like to comment on, and I have a question about the annual report that we had a link to. It's a very good report.
That's great.
Yeah, it's nice to see everything that the watershed has done in a year in one place. How do we use this? How do we make this available? Do we do printed copies and like send it to Shoreview and Little Canada and Roseville and these that are in here?
We don't do any printed. We haven't done any printed copies, but we definitely share the link with our partners. It goes to the Board of Water and Soil Resources, to Bowser. It's one of our requirements is that we complete an annual report every year. And so there's very specific things in there that are required to be included in the annual report. So we've done that. And that goes to them. And actually for the Bowser report, we send a lot of other information as well, a lot of data and things that they request. So that goes to them. And then we do share it with our project and program partners, including our cities and our counties. And then Lauren will use it as a tool on our website and in our social media accounts as well.
I'd like to add that I liked it as well, last year's and this year's, especially like the financial summary section where it categorizes by activity and program area. I thought that was very well done. I also wanted to comment on the Phelan Chain of Lakes water trail flyer. I thought that was very good.
Yeah, thank you. Diane has her hand up as well.
Yeah, I believe that you do with the other watershed districts in Washington County, kind of a meet and greet presentation for Washington County commissioners and staff, like once a year, right? But Ramsey County doesn't have that. So I would really appreciate if you could send the report to the commissioners and the county manager at a minimum.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Thank you. I will do that.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Okay. Does anybody else have anything on the Waterfest update?
Yeah. So Maddie included some information in here for you. I think it turned out to be a great event. It was hard to manage maybe 9 days of it, but really overall, I think it was, for the people that were there, it was really engaging. And especially because it wasn't one big day with a lot going on. I think it provided just some really rich conversations with people that weren't necessarily even at the park for Waterfest that happened to be coming by. But I'd be happy to hear, I know Cliff had volunteered. If you have any feedback or anybody else that would like to share.
Yeah, I was there for 2 sessions, a little bit longer than 3 hours both times, but it was, I thought it was good. It was obviously the visitation was much less than we could have handled. I mean, we had one of my sessions, there were 2 volunteers, and the other one there was 4. And yeah, and the time there was 4, there was never more than one of us really engaged with people. So that was too bad. But the weekend session brought in more people because there was the canoeing and fishing going on as well. During the weekday, it was there was less going on. But the people that interacted with us really seemed to enjoy it. I mean, the kids, there was enough activity for kids to do. And the adults, there were some of those exhibits from Washington County and another organization, I can't remember, but they found it very interesting, and I thought they learned something. And I bumped into a few people I had seen for a while, so it was good. But I
think there's
very much looking forward to the big one-day event again.
Yeah, me too. I think there's a few things too that we can take forward with us. So the use of the Goose Chase app. So it's kind of like a scavenger hunt app that was used. I think that's something that we can, use in the future, not even just for Waterfest, but for other events as well. Yeah, Who Polluted the Water mystery game that Angie, I'm going to bring up Angie Hong again, but Angie Hong developed this find the clues and solve a mystery of who polluted the water. That was really engaging, I think, for people and got them traveling around the park area. She's also done that at other neighborhood parks. She was at Tanner's Lake, I think that was last summer even, or last fall. So she can adapt that to different parks and, take that game there. So there's a few things I think that we can, learn from this event and move forward with in the future as well.
I have a funny story from one of the times I was there on the Who Polluted the Lake issue or game. So there was this lady that came with her son, and it was the second day she was there. And we pointed out this game to her, and she says, "Oh yeah, my son did that last Monday or whatever." And she said, "But he'll do it again." And I asked if he got a prize, because if they complete it and they turn it in, they can get a free life vest. And I said, "Does your son need a new life vest?" "Well, yeah, he doesn't have one." "Well, have him do it again and he'll get a life vest." And so he went up to the poster and he said, "I did that. It's so-and-so." He knew, he remembered exactly what it was and who the polluter was. I said, "Oh, okay. You want a life vest?"
There you go.
And we just gave him one. And Maddie said, "We've got these left over. We don't want to take them back. So just find people to take them."
Right.
That was funny.
Right.
He was a very precocious young man.
All right. Okay, anything else on project or program status? Okay, managers' comments. So, do you want to call the roll, Tina?
Well, yeah, sure. Cliff, did you have any other comments for tonight?
Nothing else. I was going to say that I won't be here next month, but I already said that. So I will try to tune in.
Sounds good. And Diane?
Nothing else to add. Thanks.
Thanks. Pam? Okay. Val?
I had just a couple of things. The first one is I wanted to give a sincere thank you to David and Maddie for, Carrie for taking me out on the tour. It was super informative, and he was very patient with the thousands of questions that I had. So I highly recommend going and doing that. It was eye-opening, and through that, what really opened my eyes is how much of our system is really dependent on other people. Like, I had no idea. And my question is there any way, or maybe could we at some point review that heavy dependence because it's so critical to maintain our water conveyance system at some point. It doesn't have to be an action that it gets taken, but I was just blown away. I'd point and be like, nope, not ours, not ours, not ours, not ours. And then out of all these input flows, there was one that was ours. And all of them are like, they're really run down, and then ours look pretty nice. There's, that's one example. That just as a potential future topic. And then one thing that I really liked, and the reason I brought up I think CAC, I'm going to get the acronyms wrong, but the water stewards in them. I really like this idea of finding some way of socializing both from a board staff level and then maybe a board and their level in some sort of form, just to get to know these champions of water quality and management. That's it. Those are the two comments I wanted to make.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We could talk about doing a joint meeting at some point with the CAC and the board as well. Just to have some share, be like a workshop of sorts, just to talk about the goals of the district and the goals of the CAC and how, the things that you'd like the CAC to look at. And then it would be a more social interaction as well.
And just, continue to water that partnership, right? Just to see that partnership grow. So I love that idea.
Well, the annual awards banquet is an event where we can socialize with everybody. You'd enjoy that. That's a very good. Hopefully we can have that this year.
Yeah, I hope so too. It's always nice, like maybe twice a year, once a year it's good. It's great. You're going to get to know each other, but one more time, you know what I mean? Just to see.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, it is a good idea. And Cliff, I was going to mention that too. And that's, we didn't have that opportunity this year, but it is a good opportunity. But maybe the board wants to consider, like Val said, maybe we have some kind of a summer event where we have a picnic someplace and just sort of interact with people, invite people, cook hot dogs, or better yet, we can cook carp.
I'd rather have hot dogs, but
yeah, I know. Maybe we can have carp dogs.
We just have that cooked right.
maybe.
Yeah, I was going to suggest we traditionally used to have a summer tour, and that was kind of we'd go look at some projects and get extra informed. It sounds like Val had a personal tour, but we used to do that as a group, and the CAC could be invited to join us, and then we always sit down and have a picnic and halfway through the tour, and so that could be a means to do that too.
That's a good idea. If you're okay with that, planning that for next year. Well, right now we're planning to have the Watershed Excellence Awards in November. So in person. So of course we're going to keep an eye on things, but we're moving ahead with planning that. But as far as a tour goes, maybe we should think about that for next year.
Yeah, put it in the budget for sure.
Yeah.
And we can decide if we want to do it. And speaking of tours, stuff, are we going to talk about that next meeting?
Yeah, I did some feedback from board members about locations for these mini tours that we have done in the past ahead of a board meeting. Typically they're just, one location. We visit a project that's in progress or one that was just completed, or maybe even one that's being proposed, so we kind of pick something that's a hot topic for that period of time. So I can give a more formal idea of, where some of those places might be next month. And then we can talk about that maybe for September.
That sounds good. Okay, and now it's my turn, I guess. I did have one thing, and we have some items for the agenda next time. Nicole will be talking about, give us an update on the private property permitting program that we had. And maybe Tina and Aaron, you can kind of give us an idea of when we might have our sessions on alum and PFAS, where that stands. But one thing I just did want to point out, because at the last meeting we talked about the for the documents that were being updated. And as Tina knows, I went into the map to try to find them and they weren't there, but they've been put in there now. So it's really interesting to go into the interactive map and bring up the projects that we're responsible for. It's interesting, but it's a lot less than I thought it was. And it's sort of interesting to see how they play around and how there are culverts here and there that we have responsibility for and big things over here. And then that leads to just what Val was saying was, gosh, it looks like most of the things aren't in our control. There's somebody else's control. So if you haven't, I recommend the board go and take a look at that and bring up that that view on the map. It's a kind of fun map to work with anyway. So that was all I had.
Great.
Anybody else got anything? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move adjourn.
I'll
Second,
second.
okay, we don't have to actually vote on that. We can just,
No, we're good.
okay, thank you all. See you-
Right.
see you
Happy
in
July.
person next week
Bye.
or
Good
next
night.
year, whatever it is.
Right.